Hello, good morning, and welcome to Enable College and the Certificate for in Business Administration. My name's Paul Gormley. I'll be your presenter today. Before we start, I'd just like to cover off on some administration things, some points, and some housekeeping before we start on this week's module. So we'll look at a quick introduction. We'll have a quick talk about Zoom. We'll have a look at Catapult. So I'll bring up my screen and show you Catapult and some features of that. So that's your e-learning course material, your resources to use throughout the entirety of this course. We'll also look at some time management techniques where you can get support for those sort of things to help you through this course. And we'll also look at communication and support. So quickly about me, I'm from a defence aviation background and also disability support background. In defence, I was mainly operations, leadership, management, and training. Spent quite a bit of time in training. In disability support, I work mainly with youth and young adults on the autism spectrum, people with brain injury, intellectual disabilities, and cerebral palsy. In terms of qualifications, I've got a Bachelor of Applied Science, advanced diploma in leadership and management, and I've also completed the Certificate 3 in individual support. And I, like you, currently on a journey studying towards a Certificate 4 in training and assessment. So it'd be nice that you know I'm there, going through all the same things you guys are facing, trying to get your studies done while balancing family and work. So I can definitely empathise with you there. Also, I'm proudly a former student and a graduate of Enable College, where I did my Certificate 3 in individual support. Okay, so I'll just talk about Zoom quickly. So you're all on Zoom now, or you should be on Zoom now. So first thing I'll do is I'll just send you all a quick chat message via the Zoom interface, which will say hi. And when you get that message pop up on your screen, if you can just reply with a hello or a hi or whatever you want to send back to me, just so you can see that. So if during the sessions you have any questions, if you want to send me a chat message, that's the best way to do it. So I'll get an alert on my screen like you just saw on your screen, and I'll be able to get to your question as soon as I can. Probably address most questions at the end of a session, but yeah, if you have got something, please send it through. So the Zoom interface that we're talking on now has got lots of excellent functions, got many different functions. We'll try and keep the sessions as simple as possible, just in the interests of time. I know some of you will be using doing these Zoom webinar presentations on your devices, so either on your phone or on your tablet device, if not on your laptop or desktop. So yeah, we'll keep things as simple as possible. The course will be presented in PowerPoint presentation as what we've got here at the moment. So yeah, I'll try and keep the fonts and the sizes of things bigger to allow for that as well. So yeah, with the functionality of Zoom, we've got the capability to be able to put you into syndicate rooms. We can highlight speakers, so if someone has got something to say, we can bring you up on the screen so you can address the group that way. There are also options for polling, so I can get questions up and send them out to you in real time with multiple choice answers, and you can basically do that in real time, and then I can feed back those results immediately. But for the time being, we're just going to keep it very simple. For you, it'll be yeah, just basically watching and asking any questions via the chat function for the next week or two. So so with the Zoom meeting requests, you all got the a meeting request for this Zoom presentation last week, early last week. So they'll be kept being sent out Monday afternoon, Monday evenings, and with a little registration page for you. So if you can just keep doing that, that would be fantastic. We get an idea of how many people we might get in attendance for the sessions. If for some reason you can't make the presentation, that's completely fine. We'll be uploading these PowerPoint presentations, this Zoom presentation, onto a YouTube link so that you can access it. So they will be emailed out, and we'll be aiming to get them out within 24 hours of the presentation finishing. So the material that is being presented in the PowerPoint, all of it is coming directly from your e-learning Catapult page. E-learning Catapult resources. So the presentation's built directly from that, so that all the information is in there for you, along with your assessments and guidance for those. The webinars will go no longer than 1 hour, so most of them will be looking to do within about 40 minutes. We'll do the presentation. At the beginning of each week, we will start off with a very quick refresh on the previous week's material, and also any queries that you may have had from the previous week that have been emailed through to the college to be addressed. So we'll look to do a quick summary of those sort of things to help keep you on track. As I said, with the webinar Zoom, feel free to use your iPad. It's a great idea, and those sort of things. If you can get out somewhere nice and quiet with a good Wi-Fi connection, because it can be difficult, especially during the day, to try and get a nice quiet spot. So if you can use your device, that'd be great. We still have the chat function available on there. So if for any reason throughout these presentations you get disconnected, these things happen with power outages or whatever, the network drops out. Don't panic about it. Just go back into the initial email inviting you to this presentation and re-click on the link, and I can let you back in. So that's completely fine. If I get disconnected for similar reasons, I will restart my my presentation from my end, and then we'll restart again, pick up from where we left off. If there's some sort of total failure, either with the interface or power, something like that, I'll find a way to get in touch with you, probably by email. And worst comes to worst, we'll record the presentation offline and send you the link, so you can still watch it offline. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. If you do need to leave for whatever reason during one of these sessions, if you could please just send me a courtesy message via chat, just to know that I haven't, that you haven't been disconnected for some reason, so we don't need to go looking for you or wondering what might have happened. So we know, again, that everyone's busy, things do happen. So yeah, if you do have to leave, please just send me a quick message through chat. Okay, so I'm just going to flick over to the e-learning Catapult page. Okay, so when you hear us talking or hear any reference made to Catapult or e-learning, this is what we are referring to. So this is the Enable College e-learning system. So all of your resources for this course live in here. So this is your primary resource. So this is the dashboard. So when you do log in, this is what the page that you will come to. So when you go down to your enrolments, you'll see all of the units that you're enrolled in. So for most of you, if not all of you, you'll probably just have BSB WRT 401 on here. So that's the important one. So if we click on this link, it takes us to the material for this unit of competency, which is BSB WRT 401, Write Complex Documents. So this is what we're looking at for about the next month or so. This week we're looking at part 1, which is also called element 1 of this unit of competency. So the material that you'll need to read through, review, to allow you to do this week's assessment activities all lives in here. So the presentation today is taken in its entirety from this material. So as we go through the presentation, we'll be talking about all of these different things. Okay, so it's just the 18 pages for this week. So once we've gone through this presentation, once you've reviewed this learning material, you need to get the first 4 activities of the formative assessments complete. So as we go through the activities, just some important things to note here. So you'll see a lot of these formative assessments are like short answer type questions, which makes it good. The material is in Catapult for you. So as you go through, type your answers in here. The most important thing you've got to do is to click save. Now, when you click save, that saves your answers in Catapult, and it also gives you a little indication here in green that the answers have been saved. So complete activity 1, go on and do activity 2, type your answers in, press save. Okay. Just quickly on the assessments, Ray, who you will meet next week, will go through some of the stuff with the assessments for you. So he's your assessor for this course. So any assessment related queries, make sure you send them through to Ray, and his email will be put up at the end of the presentation. So back to these questions. So some of the questions will give guidance on the words, how many words you need to use in your answer. So these are just a guide. What's being looked for is quality over quantity answers. So, for example, there's guidance here, 50 to 100 words in this answer. If you can answer the question logically within 50 words, that's fine. We don't need you to blow out your answers just so to meet the word count. That's not the idea of it. We want to know that you understand the question and you understand the material. So don't get too concerned about word counts. Okay, so as you go through, you do these questions, put in your answers, save, and that's great. And then same. So by the end of this week, it'll be up to activity 4. Save, and then that's it for the time being. So if you do want to check that your progress is actually being recorded, if you go back to the dashboard, you'll see this little counter here. So as you go through this entire unit of competency, which is going to go for quite a few more weeks yet, as you answer the questions, you'll see this little counter will just gradually build up. With regards to this submit button over here, do not touch that one. Don't submit your answers until the entire unit is complete. So that's, as I said, a few weeks off yet. So all you need to do for the time being is go through the material, answer the questions, and save. Okay, so this submit button, you won't have to touch that for a little while yet. So, and that won't be until you've finished all your formative assessments and your 2 summative assessments, which are questions and a short project. So if you do submit in the meantime by accident, it'll just get recorded as a not yet complete, not yet competent. So if you want to save some trouble, so all you need to do, go through the material, formative assessments, save. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you. We will go through that again at the end of the presentation because it typically is an area where people do get tripped up, but we just want to make sure as you get your material completed, as you do your assessments and save them, that's great. So Ray will be monitoring your progress through the assessments and making sure that you're on track and that you're not sort of falling behind. So he can see that little percentage counter I just pointed out for you before. So yeah, because as the course goes on, the further if you do start getting behind, you can end up with quite a lot of material to work through. So which brings me on to my next point, which is time management. And so we all study differently. It's all about getting into a routine and doing what works best for us, our domestic situations, our work situations. Some people find that doing 1 hour a day is good. Some people find that just having their laptop open in the kitchen is helpful. That it's a bit of a reminder. You might go through, read a couple of slides. You might do a couple of the formative, just short answer questions as you've got time. Other people may need 2 or 3 hours twice a week. It just depends on what works best for you. I know of you haven't studied for a while, so that also presents its own challenges. If you haven't got English as your first language, it is also presents a lot of challenges. Yeah, so if you do need advice, if you need tips, you need support, the college is there. There are people who are experts in this who do lots of assessments and have lots of students from different backgrounds, covering from lower level certificates up to diploma, advanced diploma level. So there is support available there. There is flexibility. The whole idea is to get each and every one of you through the training and achieving the qualification which you've signed up to do. So that's the college is there to help with that. The important thing I'll just reiterate is not to let things build up. Make sure you keep doing something, keep moving ahead. Read ahead if you can, if you know you've got a major event coming up, or you're going away, or so forth. There's nothing to stop you reading ahead and trying to get ahead of the game. With the summative assessments, you'll see there's a project at the end of each of these units. So have a look forward and see what the summative assessments involve, because they typically do involve a project which you could possibly start working on ahead of the time, instead of waiting till the last week and then just trying to cram it in. So yeah, manage your time the best you can and try and get ahead. That's the key. Communication and support. So email's the best method of communication with the college. Ray is the assessment guy I mentioned earlier. So if you've got any questions regarding assessments, please email them through to Ray. Any other general type questions, send them to me. My email will be up on the last slide as well. I'm pretty sure all of you would have received emails from both Ray and I, so that should make that easier. We've also got there's an admin email through to the college if you need to, if for some reason you can't get hold of any of us, but we endeavour to get back to your any emails, any requests within 24 hours, but just be mindful that may take up to, we say 72, but it generally won't take that long. We'll get back to you within hopefully within 12 hours with any queries. Yeah, so in terms of support, there's a lot of experience within the staff team, people from various industries who've come into the college. We've also got an awful lot of experience just within our course. So you people that are signed up to do this. So there's some people with extensive experience in business administration, and that's wonderful. So we'll be looking to draw upon your experiences, and if you want to bring your experiences into your assessments, into anything, if you've got something that you think would benefit the group, please let us know. Either during the sessions, via the chat, or email, or if you see something coming up and you're, you've got quite a bit of experience in that area, please let us know. So the more you talk to us, the more you'll get out. We want to make the course relevant. We want to make it engaging, and we want you to be prepared for your careers, well-rounded, and to get recognition for the work that you've already put in. So please, make sure that you're aware that this is definitely a two-way course. We want everyone to get everything out of it as much as you can. Okay, so moving into this week's material, writing complex documents, week one. So this week we are just looking at element one, planning documents. So after this presentation and reviewing the learning material on Catapult/e-learning, you should be able to, and I'll let you read off the slide there. So part one, determining the purposes of documents. So planning's required in pretty much everything. So, and especially so in business writing. So whether we're looking at a report or a letter or a memo, the longer and more important it is, the greater we need to plan effectively for it. So the purpose of writing a document can be anything really. So anything from conveying research findings to documenting policies, procedures, processes, proposing recommendations, options, action, responding to complaints, anything. It's essential that the terms of reference are considered when we're planning for a document. So terms of reference are guidelines for a document. So what to include, what not to include. I'll give you an example of use of terms of reference. I was once tasked with doing an investigation. It was quite a complex investigation and involved a lot of allegations, and it involved upwards of 20 people. So in conducting this investigation, or as part of the process, I was to compile a report which was going to allow the boss to make a decision on what to do. So given the stakes of what I had to do, the terms of reference I were given were key in knowing exactly where my attention should be focused on, and importantly on what not to focus on. So as part of that, these terms of reference, it went on to say that anything that I did discover that were outside of the terms of reference, if deemed important enough, if I deemed them important enough, they would be considered for their own investigation. So very useful. If I hadn't had those terms of reference, that investigation could have gone on for months. But essentially, it came down to 2 weeks by having concise terms of reference. So when we're looking at planning for our documents, we've got to consider the format and the content and the language of the document and fit it to the audience. So when looking at an action plan for the document, we need to plan, we need to research, collate the material, write and revise it, and release and present it. So when we're looking at documents, they could be any one of these or any other, even ones that aren't on here, but these are just examples. So of how documents could be represented. So they could be letters, instructions, procedures, publications, tender documentation, text for website, briefs. So there could be a whole heap of options of what type of document you're planning for. So organisations aren't the only things judged when it comes to documentation. So indeed, the organisation will be judged, but also your clients, co-workers, supervisor, public, will make judgments upon you when it comes to the quality of your written communication. So we're always being evaluated, not just as an organisation, but as individuals in the quality of our communication, especially written communication. So we've probably seen in the courses of our lives or in our workplaces, people in leadership roles sending out excessive emails, group text messages, just generating documentation, and it can become lost when things aren't done efficiently. So when we've got a lot of material being generated by the leadership, it does become like noise. So white noise is like that background noise, which you just sort of tune out to. So obviously we don't want to get into a situation like that where important information can be missed because of just the amount of documentation or information that's being sent out regularly. So and with that also becomes a credibility and morale issue within a workplace. So so when it comes to quality, quantity, think about those sort of things in the planning. Do I really need to send this out, especially if you're in a leadership role? Keep it to the point and and sharp, and it'll be much more effective. So documents are a reflection of your business, your organisation, and of the person who does produce it. So when you're planning, make sure you've got it clear in your mind what you want to achieve with it. So do you want the reader to read it and dispose of it? Do you want the person or the audience to use it to do a particular task, or maybe refer to it occasionally? So when you're doing this, you need to consider the needs of your reader. Who are they? Why are you writing this? What do you want to achieve by your document? Also when we're doing this, you want to make sure you're thinking about format, making sure the spelling's correct, these sort of things. So start thinking about it in this early stage, about what you want to achieve with this document. So if anything that is sent out is inaccurate, poorly formatted, wordy, so people trying to impress with their knowledge of the English language, so these things are going to be ignored and waste your time, waste their time, and waste your organisation's time, and can cost money. So again, letters can be used to respond to or acknowledge correspondence. It can be complaints, inquiry, invoices, orders, things like that. With business documents, they could be proposals, progress reports, recommendations, formal technical reports, tenders, policy manuals. So again, think, what is the purpose of it? What do you want your audience to do with it? What do you want to achieve with it? When we're writing your document, when we're writing our documents, you've got to be clear on who you're writing it for. The way you write it, the language, the format needs to be appropriate to that audience. So are you writing to a team of technical experts, or are you writing to a member of the public? Are you writing for a public group? Are you writing just to lay people? So we need to be aware of the aim. Are you writing to inform them, persuade them, propose something, argue for or against something, or propose or to solve a problem? So your aim will affect the way that you present the information. So when you write a work-related document, you are representing your organisation. So here's just an example of a letter that was drafted up and sent out to a person, and clearly the author of this document has not considered their audience very well. So if you have a look, so Mavis is in an aged care facility in Brisbane. There's been a product recall, or so there's a problem with the airbags in a vehicle that she may have bought years and years ago but doesn't have anymore, probably. But if you look at the wording in the document, it is just completely would more than likely be very overwhelming for someone who's probably elderly. There's bold writing talking about injury and death and risk and things like that. So that could potentially distress her. And then it talks about it's all good. We'll be emailing the details to you within the next 14 days. Now, Mavis probably doesn't even know what email is. We don't know that. And if she needs to ask any questions, she has to email or go on the web and submit an online inquiry back to these people. So this is just a very basic example of someone not knowing their audience. So looking at the purpose of a document, so are we going to try and describe or inform I'll use this document to describe or inform. So again, you need to know what level of information your audience needs, what's their current level of knowledge, why do they need the information, do they need to make decisions based upon this information, or are you just trying to make people aware of things? So your document could be very well used for decision-making processes. So you must identify your important issues quickly, present the pros and the cons so that people can make their decisions. People don't like to be confused about things. So if you're writing to the public about a particular topic, you don't want to be giving them irrelevant details. You need to give them the appropriate level of information and be positive in the way you present it. And hopefully you can encourage their interest. That one. So if we're looking to persuade or argue a point, again, setting out the facts, examining the issues, and think about what the audience might want to know. And if you're going to put a point of view forward, you've got to have clear arguments for your position. And also you need to know what potential opposing arguments for your position are, and be informed of those. So, and be prepared that way. So that's all part of the planning process. If we're going to propose something, it's a form of a persuasive report. So when you're putting forward your ideas, you want to get some sort of tangible commitment to them. So when people if you want people to make these sort of decisions, you got to have a detailed description of the proposal. As stated there, cost, schedule, risks, resources, benefits, and any opportunities for collaboration or synergy, and where you can share resources, those sort of things. That's all going to help your proposal. And again, think about what other proposals that might be being put forward and why yours would make the most sense. And because that's the whole idea of that. So getting yourself informed, putting it forward, and why yours should be selected, your proposal. With the purpose of the document could be to solve a problem. So there's in most workplaces there are people are like the serial complainers. So people do like to complain. I like to complain about things, but there's no point complaining about things. So it's, if there is a problem, present the issues with what's going wrong, present ways to solve them, and present your reasons why. So just think about in a leadership or management role, the amount of information, decisions you've got to make. And if someone walks into the office or sends you an email saying this is broken or this doesn't work, it doesn't really help anyone. And so the best way of attacking that sort of thing is to say, this is a problem. I think these are ways to solve it, and this is my recommendation. I think this way is the way we should go because of these reasons. So in my previous line of work, when we were doing those sort of things, if we're doing problem solving, and especially if we're going to try and present a course of action to one of the bosses, you'd do it that way. You'd say this is a problem. These are 3 different ways to do it, and this is why I think we should choose this way. So we generally try and come up with at least 3 options so that the leadership would actually know that you've considered different options, and this is your recommended one and why. So purpose of a document could be to report an outcome or a decision. So team progress, individual progress, outcomes. So in the project world, this is quite common. You might have weekly meetings where there's a project going on, and the leadership management just need to know where everything's at. So there's different ways to do that, and depending on your organisation and your level of expertise and your area of expertise, there may be different ways to present that. So so it can be a chronological, just like a word, like a dot point sort of brief on how things are going. You may find it appropriate. I know in projects, stoplights are used a bit, which is so it's a very quick visual representation of the status of different projects or activities. So there'll be a point, so a line saying, for example, generation of new procedure, and there'll be green, orange, or red beside it, which represents stoplight. So green means everything's on track to meet the milestone that you've set. Orange means that there are some issues, but we should be okay. Red means that it's stopped for whatever reason. So you may run out of resources, funding, personnel, whatever. So hopefully you get the idea. So a stoplight report can be quite useful, especially if there is a project type based activity that you're doing. There also, you can use Excel. There are other software programs out there for projects, things called Gantt charts and all sorts of things. So there's various ways to present it, but in your planning phase, just start thinking about that. What's the best way to represent the data that you need to put forward? Purpose of a document could be to request action. So again, a good example of this is in meetings, which we'll get onto further down the course. But I don't know if any of you have sat in a meeting where first the purpose of the meeting was to decide when to have the next meeting was, and it was just a complete waste of time. But I've been involved in meetings, and you may have as well, where there's been a decision made that something needs to be done. It's not clearly delegated to a particular person, and there's been no time set on it. So, which makes it very, very inefficient. It's not a good way of doing business. So if we do need action about anything, so if you're going to send draft and send a document that you need some action done. You need a very clear statement of what you need done. You need to tell people why it needs to be done. You might not have to go into specific details, but you need to let them know what the purpose of it, why it needs to be done, and importantly, by when. So so that's extremely important, that if you want action on something, give a date and make sure it's delegated to someone. We may need to be responding to a request. So again, if there's a request from someone, so especially in the terms of complaints, someone submits a complaint and doesn't hear anything back, people tend to get angrier and want to complain more, or even worse, escalate their complaints. So if there is a complaint, for example, that comes to your organisation, first and foremost, it needs to be acknowledged. So however that's done, so in this case by a document, but it may be phone call to say, yes, thank you for your complaint dated whatever date. And if it is going to take time to address their complaint, there may need to be some sort of research, some sort of investigation into what happened. So that may take time, but it's just a very good business practice and courtesy to let the person who has made the complaint know that you've got it and you're doing something about it. And again, when doing this, know the audience, know the demographic. So when we talk about demographic, that's could be certain socio-economic class, so it might be a poorer area maybe, or a generally age, sex, profession. So have a think about that. Like might be a cultural group, might be a special interest group. When you're thinking about your audience, they might be your competitors. So when responding, just know these sort of things, again, so that you can tailor your language in your document to the person so that they understand it and it means something to them, and it'll be received better. Okay, so when we're looking at the formats for our documents, if things are laid out nicely, they're easy to read, you've got a higher chance of achieving your aim. So the type of document you're writing will determine what the format is to a certain extent. So procedures have a certain format, operating instructions have a certain format, letters have a certain format. It's important that when you're thinking about the format, you've got to keep consistency with the elements that are used within your organisations. You can't just go rogue and design your own thing. But if there is a way that something can be improved, so most certainly take that to your managers and leaders if there are ways to make things better. But you just got to remember, you got to keep consistency when you're doing that. So a quick example on format, when I was doing some human resources work, I often saw resumes that were emailed in, and it would be a thing where the person may have been very qualified and a very good person for the position, but the way that their resumes were laid out and the way that I couldn't read them, spelling and grammar errors in them, like being sent in Word documents with, so the Microsoft Word documents with the little red squiggly lines and green squiggly lines still on there. So, their chances of employment were probably much higher if a bit more planning went in and about how they were going to send those documents through. So that's just a very quick example on format. So when we're looking at the means of communication, so how your message is going to be produced and delivered is critical during the planning process. So you got to think about what's the best way to support the goals and outcomes that that you wish to get out of it. So there are ways, there are templates within organisations on how different things need to be delivered. There is so organisations might have templates on how things need to be delivered. So just think about if you've got a 400-page report that you've got to send to someone, is it best to send that in an email or in a as an attachment like that? Potentially not. So just have a think about that. What's the best way to get your document through? So following on from that, so there are often legal requirements within documents. Again, the organisation may have guidelines on how graphs are to be presented, how tables are to be presented. If you're looking at things like tender documentation, they're quite specific in fonts and spacing and these sort of things. So just make sure you're aware of the requirements of these things. Referencing and footnoting is very important. So making sure that you've got that right and you've got that in the right format. Also, with document requirements, there are traceability and archiving type requirements. So making sure you've got the right file types and that they're stored correctly and you're adhering to privacy and confidentiality type things. So you've got to be aware of that when planning for your documents. So when we're determining the categories and the sequences of data, you've got to think about what's the best way to put this information forward that makes it easy to understand and to follow. So if you can format your document nicely, you can have it divided into logical and clearly labelled sections and use the vocabulary of the reader and avoid jargon and avoid acronyms. Like in the health industry, there are so many acronyms and many industries have got their own sets of acronyms, and an acronym to one person may mean something very different to that acronym or term in another industry. Or they may actually mean the same thing between industries. The important thing is that you can't just make that assumption. If you are going to write a document that is going to use a lot of acronyms and repeatedly use those acronyms, you might have to consider using a glossary of terms or a list of what your acronyms actually mean. So so that might be an appropriate way to do that. If you're only going to use an acronym once or twice, maybe you just you can include it as part of your paragraph with the actual term and then the acronym and brackets behind it. So you just have to think about those sort of things, but don't assume that people know what you mean by it. And it's it can get very confusing very quickly. And jargon is another thing that that can come across very unprofessional or confusing or annoying. So if you've got a term that you're replacing it in a document for a professional term, it's not good business practice. So again, just don't assume that the reader will know what you're talking about if you are going to use jargon or slang or things like that. So just avoid it. So overview on structure. Yeah. So when you're thinking about and planning for the structure and content of your documents, brainstorming is a good thing to do. So there's different ways you can brainstorm. You can use a whiteboard, you can use various software applications, you can use like the big white butcher's paper. Again, there's a jargon that you may not have may not be aware of, but that's like a big sheet of paper with marking pens to write all your ideas down, and just get everything that's in your mind or your collective minds onto a two-dimensional representation of what you are thinking about and where you can go, and that can often form the bones or the structure of your document will come out of that process. So again, when you're brainstorming, try to keep things as short and objective and as to the point as you can when in your planning process, to get your point across in as least amount of words as you can, and in a nice format. So again, keep to our policies, keep to your organisational policies doing this. So some organisations may actually require this process to occur, this brainstorming process to occur for various activities. So it could be good practice to do that for a complex document. So this is just an example of a mind map. This is from a mind map software tool. So you can just see the idea. So you can see how this could help with brainstorming. So for example, here there's a new training program, and then out of that you think, well, what is involved in the new training program? Oh, resources, marketing. There's obviously many other areas that can come out of it, but I've just taken these two as an example. When you look at resources, what resources? Trainers, you need courseware, you need facilities. And then out of that, trainers, you need to recruit them. How are you going to recruit them? Via Seek, via direct, via whatever means. So hopefully that just sort of gives you a bit of a visual representation of how a brainstorming or mind mapping process can be useful when looking at any sort of issue, but also when looking at planning for a document. So structure, yep. So the bones of your document. So if you come up with a good structure when you're planning, it'll ensure that your documents can be quickly read, understood, remembered, and acted upon. So the structure will give you those bones of your document. Just giving you an example of we're just looking at structure of a paragraph. So in this particular slide, there's a paragraph. It's the same paragraph, just written slightly differently, laid out differently, and the point is just having a look at each of these and just seeing the different effects it has upon you as the audience. So the top paragraph, spelling mistakes. So just referencing back to that the resumes that I'd look at and seeing those sort of things, those little red squiggly lines I was talking about. So the font isn't good. It's so the top paragraph, font isn't good. It's got spelling, grammar mistakes in there. Not very, I don't receive it very well reading at it, because as soon as I start reading and I see spelling mistakes and something formatted like that, I turn off. The second paragraph down, the same paragraph, but now it looks like you're being spoken down to, or that's the way I receive it. So we're talking about plagiarism, and then you get the bold and the exclamation marks. It sounds like you're being disrespected and being yelled at, so it doesn't really achieve anything in that respect. The third paragraph down, the font is, in my opinion, awful. It's all in caps, which is a very bad practice. So it's all there are no spaces, there's no indenting, not indenting, like bullet pointing or anything like that. It's hard to read. The bottom paragraph is, in my opinion, laid out the best. It's in an easy to read font. It's spaced, justified nicely, and then the dot points make it very clear what we're talking about with plagiarism. So that's just a very basic example of seeing how the structure of something can affect your intended message and how the audience receives it. Okay, we've come to the end of today's part one, element one. And so hopefully after this presentation and after reviewing the course material on e-learning Catapult, we've achieved these objectives. So key points. So we need to know who we're writing to. We need to know what we want to achieve. Need to use the appropriate format and language and adhere to our organisational policies. And our documents are a direct reflection of us and our organisations. So moving forward towards next week, so the next session, which is on Thursday the 8th. So you need to have a look at the learning support material that I went through in Catapult earlier, and go through those formative assessments, activities 1 to 4. Remember, as you do the questions, save them. And when you go back to the dashboard, do not submit them. So just do those activities, save them. If you've got any questions, there's our email addresses there. So I don't work at the college throughout the week. I work remotely. So Ray is at the college all the time. He's full time there. So again, when it comes to the assessments, make sure you send them through to any of those questions through to Ray, and we will also summarise and cover off on those in the next session on the 8th of November. So throughout the week, as you're doing them, if you've got any questions, if we find some common themes, common things that people are getting stuck on or need some information or a bit more information about, we can cover that next Thursday morning at the next webinar. So yeah, the next one we're looking at is drafting text. So it's element 2, and that'll flow on directly from this week's material. Just summarising again the Catapult. So when we have a look at when you're looking at the material this week, part 1, so that's circled there. When you're doing the assessments, it's the formative assessments, activities 1 through to 4. Making sure you save at the end of every question you do. Okay. And as you save them, you'll see the little green assessments updated bar come up. Thank you very much for your attention today. It's been great to meet you all. It's great to finally get going on this journey. Look forward to seeing you next week, and in the meantime, if you've got any questions, yeah, please send them through. Thanks again, and have a great day.